is the Doing Diversity in Writing podcast, the show where we as authors explore the better practices of writing inclusively, whether that be in terms of race, gender, ethnicity, class, sexuality, ability, and so on. Why are we here? To bring more depth and breadth to the characters in our fiction and represent them in the best way possible. My name is Bethany A. Tucker, and with me each week is my co-host, Mariëlle S. Smith. Ready? Let's dive in. Hey, Mariëlle. How you doing?
Hey, Bethany. Oh, wow. So excited. Hi, Bethany. I am tired. It's been a week, but I think the topic of today will energize me once we start talking about it. So how are you?
Pretty good. Kind of in the same boat. I had to completely get my computer back together and all my tech back together this week. So it's a little crazy.
Yes, I don't think because we did the interview with Professor Grace L. Dillon, and I don't think we actually explained to our audience what happened. First you had COVID, and then your computer died. So yeah, we were in a bit of a pickle.
Yeah, I was able to borrow a computer from one of my partners and make everything work right before the interview happened.
Yeah.
But I'm back on my normal machine, my baby, back from Texas. Half its parts are replaced, so yay for Apple Care. I didn't have to pay anything for that. Well, I paid for Apple Care and an Apple computer, so
yeah.
But it would have been a new computer time if I hadn't.
Yeah. Okay, so we're back.
So we're back, and I'm happy. And writers always have backup. I did not lose anything because I literally keep a backup hard drive on my desk. And so when it went kaputs, I was safe.
Excellent. Yeah, that's why I have everything on Google Drive. And then occasionally I back up my Google Drive.
Good idea. Very good. All right. So we decided to really have fun this week and talk about something that has come to mean a lot to both of us in the last few weeks since we were introduced to it. Well, technically, my friend introduced me to this right before New Year's, and then I have been listening to the music ever since, and that is the movie Encanto, put out by Disney. I believe it dropped last October of November. I'm not exactly sure.
It's around that time that pretty much my entire Facebook friend collection blew up, and this is interesting because I remember when Frozen came out, that was really well received as well, of course, but it was not the adults, it was the children. And this time I feel I've had a lot of friends from all corners of the world going, yeah, so my kid is watching Encanto again, or am I making her watch it again? So that's very new for me. That it's I know a lot of adults who are listening to the soundtrack nonstop, who are have watched it repeatedly. Don't feel bad for once that their kids just want to see the same thing over and over.
I mean, that's a blessing. I think as much as I love Finding Nemo, after the 33rd time I saw it in 30 days, I was ready to tear my hair out. That was a particularly bad teething session with one of my siblings.
Yeah. So it's great, right? And So let's talk about Encanto and the representation of diversity within the story, because that is, to be honest, what most of my friends also were extremely excited about.
Yeah, and to start, if you have not watched the movie yet, if you're listening and you have not watched Encanto yet, turn this off because we are going to have all kinds of spoilers in this episode. We did wait long enough that we felt most everyone would have seen Encanto already, so that we feel safe going with spoilers. But if you have not managed to see it yet, please come back and listen to this later. Otherwise, the story will be spoiled for you.
And of course, if you have no interest in watching it, you just want us here talk about it, feel free to just continue listening.
Of course. All right. So I did realize that some people did not know that Encanto is set in the country of Colombia. So I just want to say that straight up. It is actually set in one particular country. The flora, fauna, etc., represented in the film is all from Colombia.
You don't hear that actually, because I remember seeing it the second time, and the second time I watched it was with my partner. And halfway through the movie, she asked me, so where is this set exactly? And then I was like, you'll hear eventually, but it's like you hear it at the end when you have the song in which they sing about Colombia. Yeah. So you don't hear it until the end. Yeah.
I did not know when I first went into it where it was set. I had a very strong sense of place, but I didn't know. So I've heard some people say, oh, it's set in Mexico, it's set here, it's set there. No, it is set very intentionally in Colombia.
Yes, but I've read critics talking about that, even though it's set in Colombia, these are Latinx critics, right? And some enjoy that aspect, and some don't enjoy that aspect, don't appreciate that aspect. That it gives kind of a sort of like pan Latinx feel, that it could be set in different communities within South America, and some see that as a good thing, some see that as a bad thing. That's, opinions differ. So that is probably also why, because I also had trouble. I also didn't know, like if it hadn't been for somebody telling me before I saw the film, I wouldn't have known. But yeah,
I have mixed feelings about that. And as I dug into the responses, and they're still coming out, and they were mostly positive, like overwhelmingly mostly positive from everyone that I could find. But there were some criticisms made, and we'll get to that. But what I appreciated was that it was a human experience, and that it was very carefully set. Because if you knew, as I dug into it, like the little golden butterflies that show up all over the posters and all through the film, they are connected to a particular author who wrote, I think it's called magical realism. And so basically, if you wrote anything in Colombia that had magical realism in it, from what I learned very recently, you had to have the golden butterfly, the yellow butterfly in the story. So in that case, it is a very Colombian film.
Yeah, well, so it is clearly rooted in that literary tradition.
Yeah, so if you don't know enough about the tradition, you might pass it over as pan Latin America. But there are little things, like every single plant and leaf and flower exactly comes from regions of Colombia, that doesn't make it that way.
Yeah, so for those who are in the know, and that is also, so this is the thing, like I've seen critics say it even to them, right? And they've so critics who have grown up in Colombia, or even still live in Colombia, they feel it's like some sort of like pan-Latinx sort of experience. But at the same time, I've been reading critics who are like, just the way the story unfolds, just the way the story is written reminds them of so many like literary like the Colombian literary tradition, for example, where the house represents the country, right? Yes. So it's like this microcosm.
Yes.
So for them, that makes it actually, so the story, the plot makes it very Colombian, because to them, it's clearly, like I said before, like I didn't know about the butterfly, but that's also, again, like rooted specifically in that Colombian tradition, that literary tradition. But I think that makes it interesting, right? That how, and we've said this before, of course, in previous episodes, like communities are not homogenous, right? So it makes all the sense that different Colombian critics have very different and varying responses to this cultural artifact.
Yes. So I read one article where a person who's half Colombian, their father moved to the US when he was 25, and I assume he married someone of Colombian descent, because not someone of Colombian descent, someone of European descent, because she was very fair skinned and she was definitely biracial of some sort. And it was considered, because she was so pale and like almost ginger haired like you, I think, that it wasn't safe for her to go visit because of the challenges and unrest happening in Colombia at the time as she was growing up. But she took her father to the theater after they had managed to visit. She and her father had managed to visit Colombia, meet her uncles and aunts and her grandmother and her cousins. And when she and her father were sitting in the theater, there was just this overwhelming sense of, oh, this is amazing. I recognize this food. We ate the food. I know that piece of culture and it feels so real. I am going to temporarily step away because there is a monster crawling across the floor towards me. Give me a second.
Yeah, deal with that, please. Hi, everyone. It's Mariëlle. Are you tired of getting in your own way and not having a sustainable writing practice? Then the 52 Weeks of Writing Author Journal and Planner is for you. 52 Weeks of Writing makes you plan, track, reflect on, and improve your progress and goals an entire year long. It gets you to unravel the truth about why you aren't where you want to be, and it keeps you writing through weekly thought-provoking quotes and prompts. 52 Weeks of Writing brings together every lesson I have learned over the past few years as a writer and a writing coach. Wary as I am of comparisonitis and unhealthy competition, I designed this undated author journal and planner to help writers develop a practice that honors their own needs and desires. If you're ready to become the writer you were always meant to be, go to mswordsmith.nl/journal and order your copy today.
All right, I apologize for that. He literally crawled in under the door and was way too large and aggressively crawling towards me to ignore.
Was it a spider?
It was a wolf spider, one of those big jumpy kinds that's at least 2 inches across.
I do not know this creature, nor do I wish to know this creature.
I thought about showing him to you, and then I was like,
oh,
no.
No, that's okay. Let's get just back to the topic.
All right, so after that short delay where I had to rehome some of my own flora and fauna of the scary kind I will not torture Mariëlle with, can you remind me, because my last couple minutes was watching this thing creep up on me.
Okay, let's just, because I'm thinking what we should be doing here is, because I also kind of, as I was wondering what had crept under your door. Oh, great.
I know what I was talking about.
I never know what I was talking about, so good for you.
All right, so after that spider incident, there was so much recognition from this person's father and so much recognition from them after having visited their family there. And that was a theme that I saw through many of the reviews of people who said it. And there was concrete recognition of this is us. I recognize this. And I think,
and it wasn't a detail, right?
It was in the details.
Yeah, so it's like the food they were eating and stuff like that. Yeah,
and
also the things they were saying.
The things they were saying. I don't speak Spanish, and if Spanish comes up during this episode, my boyfriend will probably laugh at me because he speaks more than I do, and I'm terrible at it when I try to say Spanish. But one thing that happens sometimes is that the Spanish being used will be the wrong Spanish for where a film is set, etc.
Yes.
I ran across this many times, and they'd be like, which Spanish are you speaking? Or he was speaking with a an accent from the wrong country, and it was really obvious he was supposed to be from. I think Narcos had this problem in one of the articles I read, where someone was obviously had the wrong accent, but the people producing it didn't care because they didn't think it was important.
But it is.
But it is, especially. And from what I heard, the accents were much better in Encanto. Again, I'm going on articles. I don't speak Spanish. I don't know it well enough to recognize.
Yeah, but I did read an article of somebody geeking out about very specific words that were sort of slipped in that were very Colombian. Just Colombian versions, right? Like so there was a Colombian Colombian critic like completely geeking out because that is like a really, for them that was like that made it feel like, oh yeah. I know this hits home.
And I appreciate the fact that the film was produced in Spanish and English. So there is a complete Spanish version and then the English version as well that has a few Spanish words in it.
Yeah, I was really shocked when you have the song, I cannot pronounce that, Dos Orquitas. And then, after the film, right, you hear it in English, and that was just really weird for me.
Sometimes I like to get soundtracks and I'll listen to them in both languages.
Yeah, but that was just so odd for me that to hear that song in English. I'm like, okay. But this is because I think some of the things that we want to discuss today also have to do with how it was produced, right? Because as we discussed before on the podcast, one of the layers of diversity is who is behind the product, right? And so in terms of books, that's who's publishing it, like who are the gatekeepers, etc. But how about we start with what we do on the podcast, and that is the character. So how maybe we should talk about the immense diversity, because I think that is what made us both really happy.
It did. And I think this is something we've talked about so often and happened so well is, yes, the film was set in Colombia. Yes, there were challenges around that. Yes, they did some parts of it incredibly well. But the reason this is a global sensation right now is the diversity within the diversity.
Yeah.
And how much all of us could see ourselves in the film in some way, because as we have said over and over again, even if you're writing in a culture or a place or a career or a setting that's not yours, make everybody human. And everyone in this film is so incredibly human and flawed and insecure and desiring and having needs that it's absolutely amazing.
Yes. I mean, I remember before I watched it, you showed me, or you made me watch, as you were watching me, you made me watch Surface Pressure by the character Louisa. And that was, and it's still like, I still listen to the sound, but specifically for me, that song resonates so strongly. And I know so many other women who have that same feeling about this very particular song.
It's not just women. I hear a lot of men are like on the down low listening to it on repeat too.
Ah, there you go. Yeah. Yeah. So I think that speaks very much about something that is an issue in our wider society right now.
Yes. Louisa, for me, was, as a character creation, just knocked the ball out of the park, because not only did the people making the film, the producers and creators, fight Disney and win on allowing her to have a body style that's not the normal Disney princess pretty body style. I think she's gorgeous, but I'm also a bisexual and a woman that's rather, I could carry 50-pound bags of wheat as a kid, like at 12 years old. That's something I could do. And it gave me biceps none of my classmates had at Sunday school, which was uncomfortable. And when I saw her, I was like, oh my gosh, let me hug you.
So just for those who don't know who like what what Encanto is, like we have this magical family, and all except one of the actually no, because Abuela also doesn't have magical powers of her own. So there's two characters who don't have magical powers, although Abuela was the one who was gifted the magic, and that makes her really important because as they sing in this in the song, let's be clear, Abuela runs the show. That is very obvious.
Oh, very,
So
very obvious.
yeah, so Mirabel, the protagonist, she has two sisters. One's gift is beauty. She creates
Flowers.
beautiful flowers. And there's Luisa, who's like super strong.
And Luisa is actually the second born. So
I did not know that.
So many people think that Luisa is the firstborn because she's so strong and she's taking on everything. But the fact of the matter is that she is the second born. And I enjoyed that because so often we do have the stereotype of the firstborn takes on everything. And
yeah,
the firstborn Isabella, the one who grows flowers and is very beautiful, and that's her role in the family is to be that beauty. She's
the
taking
perfect
on
golden
too.
child.
Yeah, but she's not taking on like the work that Luisa does because she's so strong. Because when we first meet Luisa, she's like moving a church and hauling around 6 donkeys.
Yeah. But the thing is, of course, and that we learned that later on, is that Isabella, so the perfect golden child, also carries a burden. And that is the burden of always having to be beautiful. Like she is the whole, so their cousin Dolores actually once is in love with the guy they all know is going to propose to Isabella. But Isabella doesn't want to marry him. But, you know, Abuela thinks it's a good idea to connect the families in such a way. And she's a beauty and the guy is like the hunk of the village. So I find that an interesting, because we know all the Disney princesses, right? And we critique the Disney princesses. And in this case, the only one who looks like a Disney princess and is treated as a Disney princess gets really sick and tired and says in the film, when she realizes she can do more than just grow flowers and beauty, she says she's so sick and tired of being pretty. I want something true, don't you?
Yeah.
Yes, I've listened to the soundtrack over and over. But the thing is, so this blows my mind. So as we're talking about this kind of role models for girls, the whole critique on pretty, right? That's in the film. Like the film critiques it. Like at one point when Mirabel is introducing the family and she says she's the perfect golden child, like she has this, you even hear it in the song, like she has this massive eye roll, like, oh my God, like my sister does something and the whole town like swoons, right? And she's like, oh God, like I have it up to here. They're not friends, right? At the beginning, they cannot stand each other. And this, I'm pretty sure this is like a huge reason for that, because she's just like, I think she calls her sister something like a diva or something, right? Like, so the thing is that after the film, I was going to say published, but no, it's not published, launched. After the film hit the theaters and then Disney Plus, so they were sort of surprised that all the Luisa dolls sold out.
And they didn't make that many of them.
And not the Isabella dolls, because so this is for me sort of a great mind fuck that I wanted to talk to you about, is that the film critiques this idea of, you know, all you need to be is be beautiful and perfect, and then because you know that's the ideal. They critique it in the film, like this girl doesn't come alive until she starts messing things up and getting dirty, right? And going wild and doing crazy
She's
stuff.
She's basically wearing like a version of tie-dye by the end.
Yes. And instead of this sort of like pastel pinkish perfect purple, dress, right? But they still made all these dolls instead of Luisa dolls, right? And then they were surprised that the Luisa dolls sold out and kids were not really interested in the Isabella dolls. And I'm like, did you not realize the thing you were critiquing in your own, which was for me, I was really glad to see that critique.
Yeah, I actually spent like 30 minutes on the internet yesterday trying to find even one item of swag or toys or something for Isabella after she stopped being pretty perfect. But all of the stuff that Disney produced or the distributors for toys produced is her at the beginning of her journey. And so what we're all excited about for Isabella to change and be able to grow cactus and vines and everything else and not just flowers, that beautiful character arc that she has, there's nothing out there for it. Like, I would go out and consider buying a poster of her at the end of the film. I'm not interested in her at the beginning of the film.
But that is the picture of her that they want to sell. So for me, I cannot really wrap my head around that.
Disney is a large corporation.
Yeah, I was thinking the ones who are doing the marketing are not the same people who produced the film.
Yes. So
yes, I completely get that.
Yes. So I think we're seeing this transition point where there's so much change, there's so much mindfulness happening around the actual creators, but it hasn't transferred yet to the marketing department or the creation department for like what they're pushing, because those are two different entities. We have to remember Disney is so big that the film creators are not controlling the rest of it.
But I do hope this is a great lesson for whoever's, in charge of that part of the company, because I was really excited by that fact. And I'm not excited in a surprised way. I'm like, what did you expect? Like, you finally give girls other role models that they've been wanting for years. And then you're surprised that the typical role model that you have doesn't sell. I'm like, yeah. But of course, the thing about Isabella as well, and that is what I found really, and I know you've made that point before as well, is that when we talk about diversity, like there's so many different shades in this film, like there's so many different skin colors, right? The whole family is made up of different
they have a lot of tones going on.
Yeah. And so Isabella is the beauty, but she's also the darkest.
Yes. Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up, because that is an actual pushback to a culture of skin lightening, etc. I don't know how much skin lightening happens in Colombia itself, but I do know that globally, where this film is being distributed, that's an issue.
Yes.
And I do know it's issues in parts of South America. It's definitely still an issue in the US. It's definitely an issue in places I've lived in Asia.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's even Asian communities in the Netherlands. Like on the black market, you can buy
like the skin bleaching stuff.
Yes.
Yeah. So I was really excited to see that she was cast as the Disney princess kind of character.
Yes.
And then I am definitely, in the queer community, but by the end, I kind of felt she was a little bit like when she pushes Dolores, when she helps Maribel set Dolores up with her former person that she was supposed to engage, and she was so excited about it. I was like, girl, I'm feeling you a little bit. Because she was really happy being single.
Yes. And that's another thing, actually, that there's only one character of the young ones. There's only one who has a love interest.
Mm-hmm.
And that is not the protagonist.
No.
So it's not about love. It's about love, but familial love.
And not romantic love. And it's a love that has boundaries, because Dolores approaches I forget his name. I think it might be Manuel, but I'm not sure.
No, Amario, I think.
Amario. She approaches him, and then he's like, let's get married. Like 2 seconds later.
Slow down.
And she's like, all right, slow your roll. She has boundaries. She's like, we're here now. We're not going there
Yes.
yet.
Yes, we've just realized that we can be together. Yeah. And that is, of course, one of Bruno said they couldn't be together. But they could be. Yeah, in the end. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that for me, and of course we have to talk about Antonio when we talk about skin color.
Mm-hmm.
Little Antonio, because that is actually, I think, my original how I came to know, because I did not have Disney Plus, right? Because I could not get a VPN. Now I have a VPN that works, but I couldn't figure it out before. So I was completely out of touch with what Disney was producing for, well, ever since I moved to Cyprus and the pandemic started and cinemas stopped doing what they do so well. So I think I did the first moment I heard about Encanto was because that post went viral with this little boy who was standing next to the TV screen when Antonio was like on TV, and he was just like, and they look exactly alike, and the kid was just overjoyed.
They like their hair shape was exactly the same. I was like, yeah, that's amazing.
And that is like why representation matters, right?
I got so excited about Peppa and Felix because Peppa is very pale, almost like hair, and Felix is really dark.
Peppa is a ginger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I was like, it's very rare for me to see that mix of romantic interests. I mean, they're married, they're stable, and it was just really nice to see that. And to see that in a couple that's established and has a really good dynamic.
Yeah.
But there was another form of diversity that I saw in the film that I appreciate, and that was I haven't heard anyone else talk about it, so I'll just bounce it off of you. And that is male caretakers. Because Felix is very definitely that rock, that balancing force for Peppa, because she is
trying to calm her down.
Calm her down. It's raining. And he, like, everyone around them is like, oh, Peppa, it's raining. Like, stop the thunderbolts. But he's standing there with an umbrella, like, I love her. She's amazing.
I got you, boo.
Yeah, he is so, he probably goes through a ton of laundry, but he is so just calm about everything, and he loves her, and he loves her for exactly what she is.
Yeah. You say male caretakers. I just want to ask you, I'm going to bounce question back. Did you see any examples of a toxic masculinity in this production?
I hadn't actually thought about that. It's such a female-driven film.
Because that was what I was thinking. Like, I am so used, like, when I think about other Disney films, and often it's the villain, right? It's often the villain. Like, I'm thinking when I think about Frozen again, it's Prince Hans, right? He's like a toxic masculinity kind of representation. But like you say, male caretakers, and I'm like, Mirabel's dad as well. Like, he is such, like, he's a clumsy guy, right?
Yeah, he's always getting hurt.
But he is an extremely supportive dad.
He's a very
like
supportive
a really
dad.
nice.
He's an even more supportive partner to his wife. Like, he thinks the world of her, and he's right there for everything, and he pitches in.
So it's just funny to see, because these women all have, all these people have gifts, right? Almost all of them have gifts, right? But it's like, so the men fall in love with them, and then they give space to that. And that is, of course, and this is something I think that a lot of women who are not necessarily magically gifted, but are really good at something, right? Like, there's always this discussion that people kind of assume that when a woman starts making more money than her husband, or is more or male partner, or is more successful than her male partner, that her male partner somehow suffers because of that, or that it sort of takes away his masculinity or something. And that is not something that is a problem for these men in this particular film.
Yeah, I would say that they were both of these men that married into the Madrigal family, to the two sisters. They're not under pressure that some men get put under pressure to provide. The family collectively is providing, the magic is providing, their wives have very significant skill sets that the community needs. So they have the space, maybe even the permission, to feel into their feelings, to be there for their children, to be there for their significant others in a way that male characters that are written that have all this pressure and like, you know, you got to do this and you got to do that, don't have the space to do. Literally not the time of the day, definitely.
Yeah, because these two husbands, what I see, they provide so much emotional support.
Oh, the family would have fallen apart years ago without them.
Yeah, but I think that for men, I think that is really great to see.
Yes, but it's only, I might get in trouble on this one. It's only because the women are not pushing the toxic masculinity on them.
Of course, and this is the thing with toxic masculinity, patriarchy, white supremacy, etc., etc.
It can be enforced by either.
It's like a lot of women are complicit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But it was so nice to see men who are very comfortable letting their women shine.
Yeah, and we're no less themselves.
Yeah. No, because everybody has a role. Yeah.
So I'm checking the clock because I know that this episode has to be a little bit shorter than some of the ones we've done recently. And I was going to bring up diversity that happened in a couple other ways.
Yes, go ahead.
Specifically, I think we've mentioned body types. I didn't know if you wanted to go into that anymore.
Well, I mean, they do all, and this is the thing. It's not just that everybody has a different skin color, and that there's like various tones there. But yeah, everybody does have a different body type.
Yeah, and I was reading about this, and this is probably one of the points I saw some of the most mixed reviews. Is some people were like, well, in Colombia, a family wouldn't look like that. We don't mix like that. It wouldn't be okay. And others saying, this is what my family looks like.
Yeah, so again, it's like Colombian critics are not some homogenous group, right? They all have their own experiences.
Yeah.
I also read one who said, this might not be what we look like right now, but I definitely think that this is something to aspire to, that this should be the ideal, that we can mix like this.
Yes. It made me think of my own. Yeah, it made me think of my own family. We don't have anybody of Colombian descent, but we definitely have different people with different skin tones, and the younger generations do not look the same as the older generations.
No.
Yeah. So one of the other things, and I went down a rabbit hole on YouTube while I was, kind of burning up with COVID fever. I just laid in bed and I listened to a lot of people looking at the musical aspects of the film. And the music was absolutely amazing. Lin-Manuel, he did Hamilton and The Heights, and he was part of Moana. He brought his signature to it. It was amazing. He also
did what's his oh, now I'm losing the guy who did Rent, the musical. Tick 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 boom.
I don't know
with Garfield. Okay, that's one of the things he did as well. Yeah, it was really good. Yeah.
So also Jermaine Franco did the other music in the film and was part of the so Lin-Manuel wrote music for it, wrote lyrics for it, definitely. But the score was by a woman named Jermaine Franco.
Okay.
And I think that gets lost because everyone's so excited about Lin-Manuel and the songs. but I wanted to remind everyone that she also did it as well.
It's actually, I read somewhere that somebody was actually saying that, yes, of course, the music is great because, it's Lin-Manuel Miranda, but also we should be really careful to, whenever there's some Latinx thingy going on, that we ask the same person. So they were like, we should not fall into that trap. So I'm actually glad that you point out it's not just Lin-Manuel. It's actually, a combination of different people.
Yeah, and it was produced by Mike Elizondo. So there was a lot of people went into it. But we all recognize one name and we graphed onto it. We get really excited because I mean, come on, evidently Bruno's name is Bruno and not Oscar, because Lin-Manuel Miranda was writing the music and he was like, this would work so much if I could use something with the no.
Yeah, because that's like originally, I don't know if everybody knows that, but originally Bruno was called as Oscar, and then of course like that just doesn't really work with the song. And I think it's, we don't talk about Bruno. It's like such a great song.
So in the music itself, I listened to a whole bunch of people who either produce music or are singers or know a lot about music, and there's a depth and a diversity in the music used. I believe the team that produced the music went to Colombia for research, and then also I got so excited because I sing a little bit for myself. I haven't performed, but it's often so hard for me to sing with the original scores because my voice is lower. I know it doesn't sound that way all the time, but it's really hard for me to hold and sustain higher notes. And Louisa is an alto, like this beautiful deep alto, and it's so easy to sing along because she has a lower voice. And a lot of times female characters get cast with soprano voices, but a lot of women are not sopranos.
No.
So I was glad to see that expansion happen. I will probably...
So it's not just her body type and the role that she has, like as a middle child being sort of like the rock, literally, almost, that everybody sort of the person everybody sort of expects to hold everything together, right? Because that's her strength. But that fits, like the voice fits so much with that.
Yes, it was very natural, but it also added more diversity to the stereotypical European cast. Most women, like anybody who's a lead person, has to be a soprano or something, that comes out of like that opera tradition of Europe, which frustrated the heck out of me when I was more into music. But probably one of the reasons I didn't sing. But the other part was that each character sings and can change the way they sing. And they didn't have to sing as a choir, like all singing in the same style. Like when Peppa and Felix sing together, they kind of have a different take on the music and a different way that they form their phrasing, and yet it still works together. It's harmonized together. And from what I could tell, it seemed to be partially the way it was written for the characters, but also when the actors and singers were brought in, they were allowed to work with that organically and meld that together, which to me just speaks of character building on another level. And as writers, I'm not exactly sure how to apply that over, except to say, don't write all your dialogue so it sounds the same for all of your characters.
Yeah, but I think that's maybe why a lot of people love We Don't Talk About Bruno so much, is because at the end of that song, that's when you have all these voices, they overlap and they sort of like interweave, and it's beautifully done, but they're all still recognizable very much. It's very particular.
Everyone
so it doesn't become one sound.
Yeah, at the end of the film, it's not like the family becomes this homogenous mass and, oh, we're all happy together. They are all very distinct.
Yes.
And getting that into our fiction on the page without the visuals, it can be more challenging and take more intention. but it's so worth it when it can be done.
And I do think with dialogue, like specifically what people say, but even like the rhythm in which they say things, like that can be very character specific. And it would be a great exercise to do, like in terms of self-editing, is to like get a few pages, take all your dialogue from it, right? Just the dialogue, and then see for yourself whether you still recognize who is saying what.
I always get nervous when I realize, oh, I could swap this person's dialogue between two characters. And when I was editing Unchosen One, the Queen's Enforcer, there was a couple times where I realized, oh, I can just shift this dialogue here and here. And I was like, that's not good. I need to rewrite that.
Yes, because, and this is the thing, because sometimes you're reading a book and you're like, it doesn't sound like this character. Yeah, it doesn't sound like this something this character should say. So even that, like the words they choose, that has to sort of match, right?
Yeah, like I went back through Jarvis's, the main character, the Queen's Enforcer. I went through his line, and he's supposed to be really taciturn and gruff, and he doesn't really like it. And my natural inclinations for these longer sentences, the classical type of stuff. So I was like, oh, I need to go back and chop all of his stuff up. He's not gonna, he doesn't have any exposition. He's just gonna say something and that's it. And if you don't get it, you don't get it. I like literally went and like shortened what he said.
Yeah. But I think that's a really good way of sort of translating what we see done in Encanto to novel writing.
Yeah. And I would say to someone, if I was helping someone try to bring in this distinctiveness in dialogue, much like style sheets are made in films or for a marketing campaign, go ahead and make a style sheet for your characters. Like, this character does not speak in sentences over 10 words. This character will never use X word. Like, as an editor, if someone handed me a sheet like that, I'd be like, okay, you know what you're doing. I can edit to this.
And that works, right, for us as well.
No one has ever done that for me. No one has ever.
I will admit, like when you edit novels, like I do give comments back or feedbacks saying, like, just from how I understand this character, this feels like a really strong word for them, or this feels like a very weak way of expressing them, just from what I get. So I will, it is something you pick up on.
It's something that I'm considering doing going forward, because I've spent so much time partially doing this podcast, but partially working with the next installment. I'm like, I need to understand so clearly, because I have a cast of like 20 characters in this huge book. They need to sound so distinct. So that's part of what came up for me as I was sitting with the end of Encanto and thinking about the distinct voices, and like, this was so intentional.
So I know, I have read a little bit of critique, right, about this as well, is that the music is too mainstreamy to be truly Colombian and stuff like that. But then there are also people who really enjoyed it. So again, it's like, there will always be, and we talked about this before as well, it's like, no matter how hard you try, there will always be people and something just doesn't resonate with them. That's just what it is, right? It's
there's also a lot of pressure on Encanto, because one thing that came up in both of our research is the last thing people think about media-wise, film-wise, from Colombia is Narcos. So it's just so if there's a room representing Colombia on a more global scale of media, there's two things standing in that room right now. It's Encanto and Narcos. It's not the plethora of representation. So there's so much pressure to be everything Colombian instead of just letting it be, a piece of it.
Yes, and I think this is some of the critiques that I've read, is that some critics say it's trying to be, like, in terms of setting, it's trying to be like all of Colombia in one setting, and that's just impossible. But like, you're right, there is a lot of pressure on. We know that like Narcos is like the thing that people think about when they think about popular representation of Colombia. So yeah, like if you want to undo some of that, there's quite a job right? It's quite a task.
It's not going to happen with one production.
No, and this is the whole idea, this sort of metaphor with this room that we've talked about before, right? That the reason why when you read something written by some white male, straight middle class guy, you don't think that goes for all white male, straight male. I'm mixing it up. You know what I'm saying?
The everyman character that comes
the
out
everyman,
of
right? Yes. The reason why we read a novel by one of them doesn't make us think that they're all like that is because there are so many voices in that room, right? So when one of them speaks up, well, some of us don't even hear them, right? Over all the other voices that are there. When we talk about underrepresentation, right? This room is virtually empty. So Narcos, it kind of feels to me like that Narcos is like a megaphone, right? And it's just like screaming into the megaphone. And then the job is to add voices that maybe tell another story. And so now in this room, and of course, like within Colombia, there's like tons of representations, right? Just local productions and novels. And I mean, and in novels as well, like there's plenty of novels from Colombia, right? That are well known. But even those are not, I mean, there aren't as many as there are. It's not a mainstream thing yet. So you have this idea, right? There's only so many voices. So when we look at like, you know, popular media, it now we have Narcos and Encanto. So we're gonna need so many more voices to represent everything. And also Encanto cannot fix everything that Narcos has done to the representation of Colombia and Colombian people.
Yeah, I can't speak to Narcos. I've never seen it. What I heard about it wasn't my jam, so I can't critique it or say what it's done.
My ex-partner saw it, and that just means that I spent a lot of time on the couch writing while the TV was on. So I've seen a lot of things just sort of like from the corner of my eye. So
you imbibed it secondhand, sort of.
Yes, I know it's very violent, right? It's about it's all about the drug cartels. And I'm not saying that is not an issue, right? But that's not all there is to Colombia and its people.
Definitely not. And this is just, I am really excited to see a company as big as Disney diversifying and acknowledging that, like one statistic I read is like 20% of moviegoers are Latinx or have a background in Central and South America. So you think you would be producing for that demographic, and there is a lot of excitement for people to be able to go and see more representation. For me personally, even though I'm not Colombian, it still looks more like my family, and that's exciting. It's taking down, it's expansion, and it's just utterly, Encanto is just so utterly human. All of us have families, and all of us have problems in our families.
And you know what I found really, what for me was a really, because it's not like, so we talked about Antonio and how we have this you know, this picture of this little boy looking exactly like Antonio, like standing next to the television screen and being like, what? Like, because that hardly ever happens, right? I think it might happen, but then in different kind of, not in such a positive representation. But, you know, for me, when I think of Antonio, I actually think of my cousin, and like my cousin is now 14 years old, right? So I'm not even sure whether he's going to see it, because he might be beyond Disney right now. You know, he's like into playing soccer and stuff like that. And he's trying to be really cool, and he's really tall. But when he was like that age, like animals were his thing, right? He was obsessed. So for me, I'm like, not only do we see that kids who look like Antonio finally see themselves on the screen, but what we also have is that I'm 100% positive that if my cousin if he'd been younger, he would have seen that Antonio would have become his role model. That Antonio would be who he aspired to be. And that, for me, I think, is also really important, because it's so often the other way around. Like, the role models that we have are often so white and so straight and so Anglo, not like sort of like Western European American, right? So for me, I'm like, that is really that is sort of an extra step of excitement for me. Not just that kids who look like Antonio and like the other kids in the in the film, but also that white kids get role models who do not look like them.
I remember some of this conversation coming up for Lilo and Stitch, which I did not see necessarily right when it came out. I forget why. I wasn't watching TV a lot. I mean, films a lot back then. But when I finally did sit down and watch Lilo and Stitch, that was one thing that came up for me. It was so human, definitely about family. People could relate, and it was more than just, the run-of-the-mill kind of casting that we had seen before.
Yeah. So I think that for me is also really important in terms of representation. It's not just about, although that is the big part of it for me, is that everybody gets to see themselves represented in culture. But I think for me, it's sort of like what I find really exciting is that kids will now get to have role models in their entire diversity.
I mean, I kind of totally expect picture books of Antonio and his animal friends having adventures showing up around, bookstores and libraries. And I haven't seen it yet, but it has to be coming. Disney is not going to pass that up.
No, and I think it's going to be really successful. Yeah, because he's such a relatable. I mean, how many kids do you know of that age who are obsessed with animals?
I totally expect that I will be buying something for my own nephew at some point, because he's about 3.
Yes, right. So it's such a normal thing for kids.
Yeah. It is kind of exciting because my nephew's big thing right now is Spider-Man. Huge Spider-Man fan. Although sometimes Spider-Man mixes with Hobbit costumes and, other things like tiaras and ballerina stuff. So he's got the whole thing at the same time. And it's amazing.
Good. That's good. Yeah.
My sister,
you can create your own reality, right?
Oh, he does not care. No, anyway, this is not a podcast about Auntie geeking out over her.
Same. Yeah. But so we do it like just before we close off, like, yes, we've had the criticism that it looks like even though there were like plenty of cultural cultural consultants, that's the word I was looking for,
including the Colombian Cultural Trust from the country of Colombia was involved.
Yeah, there are people, and I do think that's a really valid point of critique. There are still people who are saying that the actual people behind it are still not Colombian. Yes, a lot of them had like Latinx roots, but they were not necessarily Colombian. And it's not as if Colombia doesn't have people they could have hired, as if they aren't Colombian people they could have hired, right? Who are in that line of work. So this is, of course, a level of production that we've talked about before as well. So for me, like, I completely agree that this is something that I hope Disney will be working towards. I actually read somewhere that they did it better with Coco, which I haven't watched yet.
You definitely need to watch that one.
Yeah, and that it was sort of like, so for them, Encanto felt a little bit like a step back, right? They were doing really well. And then in terms of how the film was, like, when you look at the whole level, like all the different departments involved and stuff, some people felt that it was a little bit of a step back because it wasn't as involved as Coco was. So that is definitely something that I hope Disney will be working towards. But if we look at where Disney has been, that I'm really excited that we now have films like Encanto.
Yeah, me too. It's a really good trend, and it's going to be the type of stuff that children today grow up with, and a touchstone for adults. And it's definitely a brighter and more positive. We can build on this. This is a good place to keep.
And I think this is actually a really important point to make, is that this doesn't have to be the end point, right? And that is why I'm really glad that some critics are still extremely critical, because that means that we keep pushing for better. So I'm always,
but we're still allowed to, we're still
but that's
enjoy it today.
But that's my point, that's sort of how I grew up in sort of like my academic environment, that we talk a lot about affirmative reading, which means like you acknowledge what something is doing, right? While you can still look at the things that can be improved. So instead of saying, oh, again, they failed because, they didn't hire this or this person, you can look at everything that went well and then still say, okay, so for next time, maybe try this. That for me is the best. So I think we should definitely read this one affirmatively as well, because I think it's making huge strides towards this sort of future that we're all hoping for.
I agree. I am going to wrap this up here because I need to have pans banging around in my kitchen, and that is too loud for the microphone.
Yes. And also people need, if they haven't seen it yet, and if you still listened because you were like, yeah, maybe I don't need to see it, just go watch it. Treat yourself.
There's so much we didn't talk about.
Yeah.
All right. Until next week, everyone.
Yes. Talk to you next week. Thank you for joining us. Music for this show was written and produced by Eric Mills. If you found this episode helpful, please rate and review on your favorite podcast app and spread the word so other writers can find us too. To get our Doing Diversity in Writing Toolkit, which includes all bonus material from Season 1, go to representationmatters.art. That's .art. Here you will also find our episode show notes. Happy writing, and see you next episode!